Welcome. Hi, it's me. It's Cindy Horgan from Cape Cod Children's Place. We have been trying to post on our website some small little snippets of what we call parent education to help parents during these times when we can't meet in person. And so just hoping to give just a few pieces of information. Last post we put out there was about behavior and understanding it. And I think it's when you start to understand the goal of behavior, it lays the groundwork for how we discipline our children and what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking of discipline, and how important it is in our job as parent or caregiver to know that that is really a big, huge responsibility, and it's a gift to our children, because discipline is not punishment. And I need to be very clear on that difference. Discipline is about teaching. Punishment is really about controlling. And so when I'm talking about discipline, I'm always thinking of it in the form of teaching our children what it is we want them to do. As I give just this piece of information, I think that this is one of those pieces of our parenting journey that often can be a real challenge for us, because when it comes to discipline and how we do it with our children, there's a lot of influences that impact how that's done. Where we come from, our culture, our race, our ethnicity, there's a lot of pieces of that that are involved in the way that we discipline our children. But the biggest impact on the way that we do it is where we came from, how we were disciplined as a child. And I think it's always important to know that I believe every parent or caregiver sets out to do this really important job of parenting with the best intentions. So I believe we all do the best that we can with what we have. I know that sometimes when I start to talk about different discipline strategies and what are the most helpful and ones that aren't, sometimes we can do a little bit of reflection on where we came from, and it can stir up some things. But I truly believe, and I know to be true, that everybody wants to do this the best way that they can, but what's in their toolbox? So the other part when I'm doing that question is I come to this job of parenting with a partner, with my husband, my boyfriend. He came from a whole different place. And so very often this can be one of the challenging places in that family dynamic, when we have coming from two different places that don't always make sense to each other. So I invite you to be kind and patient with each other as you understand this work of discipline even better. So when I think of disciplining, it's really important I start with the fact that what I'm going to talk about today has a lot to do with where your children are in child development. So prior to the age of 3, so in that brand new throughout as we're approaching 3, the most valuable tool in our toolbox for discipline with our children is redirection. And what that means is if they continue to grab the clicker when you're trying to watch the news and they continue to change the channels, redirection looks like this. You're going to give them something that they can do. You're going to say, that's a grown-up toy, if you want to call it that. This is what you can do. And so, the child that's throwing the ball in the house, redirection means balls are for outside. That's how we look at redirection. When it comes to understanding discipline, remembering that it's about loving teaching. And I think that that's a great way to think about your job as parent and caregiver, that you're teaching your child really healthy boundaries, where the border is, where the line is. And that is such a gift to children, because when children are clear on where the boundaries are, when they're clear where the line is, where the fence is, it is a huge contributing factor to their level of confidence and their capacity to be regulated. So if those lines of where the boundaries are wiggle all the time, we have a child that's really doesn't know where it begins and ends. And often discipline can look like a hot mess because we are never consistent. So words that I'm going to use a lot today are words like clear boundaries, consistency, and expectations, just so you know that. So let me begin with 3 different styles of discipline. And so part of your work as you're listening to me is to sort of do a little reflection here about where did I come from? What was the style of discipline in my place of origin? And I always use the 2 extremes. The first one I talk about is the authoritarian style of discipline. And that's nicknamed the drill sergeant. It's my way or the highway. It's because I said so. Just do it because I said so. So that's at one end of the extreme. The complete other end, the opposite, is what we call the permissive parent, the permissive style of discipline, and that's often the doormat. So that's sometimes the parent that wants their child to think of them as their best friend, that they never want to use that word no, because they never want to disappoint their children. And so that permissive parent is one that the lines are always fuzzy, and they're over there. And in today's culture, I often see parents in that going towards that permissive style of discipline really out of guilt, and guilt of the busyness of our lives. And so when we parent from guilt, we're kind of handicapping our children in some ways as far as their development. And so we're limiting them. One of the next places, the place that is the healthy place to be, the ideal place to be, the place that we should gravitate to, is right there in the middle, and that's called an authoritative parent. And that's a home that has consistent routines, clear expectations, that things are established in fairness for the whole family, what works for everybody. Now again, I say to you, the ideal place to be is right there in the middle. The other piece I say to you is that there's some times that we need to be more of an authoritarian parent. When it's around safety, it's not debatable. It's because I said so. We do not ride our bikes without a helmet. That's it. No is no. Around safety. There are times that being a permissive parent is really appropriate. Every so often, just kind of break the rules, dessert first or something like that. And every so often, that is really, really appropriate, especially during these times where many of us have been really trying to be both parent, teacher, worker, partner, all of those at the same time, to really say, you know what, today is just a silly day. We're going to wear our clothes backwards. We're not going to do anything that we're supposed to do because we're taking a break. That's okay. If we hover in that place of permissive, or we hover in that place of authoritarian, what doesn't develop in children is what I call this inner sense of self, this ability to sort of navigate the world safely. The child that is in a home where authoritarian discipline, that drill sergeant, is the main way of doing it, they never develop their own capacity for their own voice. So they really struggle with that. And in that permissive place, the child that grows up in that environment, never becomes accustomed to boundaries or the word no, which is a really important part of being a parent or caregiver, is having the word no have meaning and be a good thing for us. I often, as an early preschool teacher, I remember I could clearly define the different styles of discipline that were happening in a home by this reaction. So imagine a child is sitting at the table and they spill their milk. The child that comes from the authoritarian home is probably going to shiver with fear. And when someone says, "What happened here?" they're going to say, "I don't know," because owning that could mean it could be hard for them. The child that's in the permissive home is going to look at that mess on the table and say, "Who's cleaning this up? There's a mess here." The child in the authoritative home, that place in the middle, that's the child that says, "Can you show me where the towel is so I may clean this?" They learn to take responsibility. So it's important to know that. Now, I would love to tell you, stand up here and tell you that I have been nothing in my life but an authoritative parent. And quite honestly, I would be lying to you. I have to tell you honestly that where I came from had a lot of influence on how I started this. I guarantee you, I grew up in a place that often felt chaotic. There was a ton of love, but it felt chaotic. So I would say in the biggest span of years, it was reflective of a permissive house. That was not an easy place for me as a child. So chaos felt unsafe to me as a child. So I can tell you as a mom today, I have never traveled down permissive lane. But I can tell you that when things feel overwhelming to me, when it felt chaotic to me, I absolutely became an authoritarian parent, trying to gain control, trying to put it all to make sense. So it's really important to kind of process this. And it takes us sometimes. Sometimes we can be a little bit of both. I can tell you this, that when I speak to adults about this particular topic, and I ask them where they came from, it is not unusual for me to hear Well, my dad was permissive and my mom was authoritarian, or vice versa. What I can tell you that happens to children that grow up in those extremes, I call it crazy making. It is really hard for them to know where they begin and all of those things. That place in the center, and it takes a lot of work to get there, but once you get there, it becomes rhythm to your family. So just to process that, and as I'm saying all of this, I think it's really important to know that if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm really struggling with this, call me at the Cape Cod Children's Place, 508-240-3310, because that's what I get to do, is support parents through this journey and this process. So now that we understand those 3 styles of discipline and we're starting to do reflect of who am I and where am I in that, let's talk about how we get to that middle place, that authoritative parent, and what the tools are. Very often, when I start to talk about being an authoritative parent, some of the ways that I teach are by using the ability for natural and logical consequences. So natural consequences happen naturally. If it's raining out and I don't wear a raincoat, I am going to get wet. That is a natural consequence. If I forget my lunch at home and I come to work and I have nothing else, I am going to be hungry. That is a natural consequence. Logical consequences over the years have been an incredible tool for me. And again, I want to remind us all that race and culture and ethnicity have lots of pieces in this puzzle too. And I think it's always important to honor those. But when it comes to logical consequences, we think in terms of communication, clear expectations, and consistency. And when we think of logical consequences, think about practicing for something and teaching. And so I use the example of, we often as parents buy into this idea that we're using logical consequences when we say a phrase like this to our child. If we're going into the store and we say to them, going into the store now, remember, you need to be good. We think we've given them great information. Well, my question is, really, what does that mean? What does your version of be good mean, and what does my version of be good mean? It's really not enough if we're really teaching our children. So when we're talking about going into a supermarket and using logical consequences and thinking of those 3 C's, we're going to first communicate clear expectations. We're going into the supermarket and now we need to be safe. Does everybody remember about being safe in the supermarket? And when we're talking to our young children, we're saying that means that you hold on to the carriage and you stay next to mom or dad or caregiver, whomever that person is. That's the clear expectation. We talk about we only touch things on the shelves that are made of cardboard. That's a clear expectation. So we're giving that clear expectation. We want to be consistent. So if sometimes we say, you know what, you go in, we're going to play tag. You run up one aisle and I run up another aisle. That's not consistent. That's crazy making. We want to be very clear. The next thing that we want to talk about is the opportunity to remind them. And so we want to, if we're in the supermarket and we've done that work before we've gone in, that clear expectation of what it's going to be, and we are following that, I'm going to say when we get into that second aisle, thank you for remembering how it is that we behave in the supermarket. I want to reinforce that. What I neglected to say is to understand what the consequence is. And so if I've said to my child, I need you to be respectful in the supermarket, and this is what it looks like, and I give those clear expectations. And then I say to them, if we're not able to do that today, we're going to leave the supermarket. We're not going to be able to buy our groceries. We will leave the supermarket. Where we often kind of fall short, once we've made that commitment, we've given the clear expectations, and we say what the consequence is, when I tend to see families really struggle is when they start to give, if you do it again, if you do it again, if you don't stop that, if you do it again, and we don't follow through. We've got to present what the consequence is, and then we have to follow through. We have to follow through, and that might not mean, if this is your only chance to get to the supermarket, following through may just mean that you're going to go back out and have a do-over. You're going to start again. You're going to go back out and remind them again. But if you continue each aisle, and they're now running down the aisle, and they're now throwing glass on the floor, and whatever it might be, and you continue to say, if you don't stop, If you don't stop, we haven't put the boundary in place that they need. And what is really, really important is that the boundaries help children feel safe, and they give them the parameters. And by design, just so you know this, children are brilliant, and their job is to really make sure that we mean it. So if we've put that boundary in place and we say, this is how it's going to be, and they go up and they say, this is the line, this is the line, and you say, yes, that is the line. And then they push the line a little bit. They're asking us to be very clear. If we say, hey, you know what, push it a little bit, that's when we've left authoritative, and that's when we go to permissive. Our job is to continue to bring the line back here. Our job is to be consistent with it. It is also, when it comes to discipline, know your child. Know when you're asking them, are these expectations that they're able to do? Are they old enough to do them? You know, when I think sometimes of the teaching that we do for our children, sometimes we may want to start in small chunks. So if I'm trying to get them to be able to work in the supermarket with me and I need them to do that, I may start with something small. We're just going in for milk and bread today. And what does that look like so that they have an opportunity to be successful? So when it comes to discipline, this is the quick way of saying it. Making sure our expectations are clear, that we've communicated, that we know that they're practicing, that they're training, that we're setting them up for success, but that the consequence in that we follow through, that we're committed to it. And if we followed through and we've done exactly what we said we were going to do, and we've left the store if they weren't able to, we've done the job of disciplining. If we get in the car and say, well, that was the most horrible experience of my life, and I can't believe that, and every time we get back into that car, I hope we don't repeat that again, we've left discipline and we've gone into shaming. And so it's really important that we don't have to repeat it again and again and again. Our actions mean a lot, and when we follow through with what we said we were going to do, that is when we're successful. So discipline, and this is a quick and brief way of saying it. We have a responsibility. We just can't say be good or don't do that. We need to tell children what it is that we expect of them. So again, I encourage you to reach out, to call us at the Cape Cod Children's Place. I can provide you with resources, I can answer questions, and I can support throughout that. So the number here is 508-240-3310. We are funded by the Children's Trust and the Safe Child Communities Grant, as well as through the Department of Early Education and Care and the CFCE grant. It is a privilege to be on this journey with you. Thank you, and be well.